So the media and the news are filled with reports of coronavirus, at least as of today, as of me recording this video. While there's no doubt that this is a very serious matter, there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of emotions associated with this. So I want to take this opportunity to kind of look at this rationally and look at the data and have the data speak for itself. I wanted to build an application which tracks the total number of cases of coronavirus that's been reported around the globe. And I thought, well, when I'm doing this, let me actually make a tutorial of how to do something like this so that you can try this out and build an application like this yourself. So this is the application that I'm building, right? I have an application which reports the total number of cases reported all around the globe of this disease. And there is a breakdown based on the state and the country, the total number of cases that have been reported so far from the beginning. And then it also tracks the changes since the last day. How many new cases have been reported today as opposed to before? Okay, so this is the application that we're going to build using Spring Boot. So let's check out how we would build an application like this using Spring Boot and Java. Okay, I'm going to start by going to my usual place where I start any Spring Boot project. That's start.spring.io. It's called Spring Initializer, which allows me to start up a blank Spring Boot project that I can later write code in. Right, I'm going to choose the group io.javabrains, and I'm going to call the project coronavirus-tracker. And there are a couple of dependencies that I know I'm going to add. The first is web, because this is a web application. I am going to need the web dependency. And then this is not going to be a REST API. This is going to have HTML responses, and I'm planning to use Timeleaf for it so that I can write HTML templates, and I don't have to write like a front end using JavaScript for that, right? I want my application to be directly accessible on a browser. So I'm going to use Timeleaf, which is kind of like the templating engine, which allows me to generate HTML responses. And I'm going to use DevTools because this is always handy. Okay, so with this, I should be good to go for now. I'm just using all of the defaults for the rest of the options here. And I'm going to click Generate, and this is going to load a Spring Boot project in a zip format. I'm going to extract this and open this in IntelliJ. Okay, so here's my downloaded zip file that I've extracted over here, and I'm importing this in IntelliJ by clicking on Import Project. And I'm going to choose the Maven model because I know that this is a Maven project. Because remember, we chose the default, and the default has Maven selected. So I'm using the Maven model. Now what IntelliJ is going to do is load all the dependencies because it knows it's a Maven project. It's going to look at the pom.xml and load all the dependencies. So let that do its thing. Here is my Maven project that's open over here. All right, and here I'm going to choose the Java version as 12 because that's the version that I have installed, and I want to use a couple of new features of Java. Now, since I've changed this, there is a chance that you might need to update the compiler settings in your IntelliJ to use language 12 as well. So I'm going to choose 12 over here. You can also specify per module bytecode versions. Basically what I'm doing is I'm going to the Java compiler setting over here and then setting the bytecode version to 12. Okay, I'm going to press OK, and we should be good to go. Now what I'm going to do is I need to figure out how to get this data, right? We want to have a web application that provides information, but we need a source. We need a source of data. And I have a source with me that I can use, but it's not really in the right format, which is where some of our work is going to come into the picture, right? So we have a source which is in a slightly different format that we're gonna have to modify. All right, so I'm gonna search for a GitHub, and I'm going to search for a specific GitHub repo which has all the reported cases of coronavirus around the world. And this is something that is being updated on a daily basis. Okay, so this is pretty handy. Now here in this repo, there is this folder called COVID-19 data, right? So here, this is a bunch of daily reports and time series reports that is kept up to date on a daily basis. Okay, so here are the confirmed cases files, which is basically all the locations and all the confirmed cases as per date. Okay, so this is the location, the country, latitude, longitude, and then on that particular date, how many confirmed cases were in that location, right? So this is actually a CSV file. So if you click on this raw, you can see it's basically comma separated files with all the different locations that have been reported. Okay, and this goes on up to the current date. Okay, so if I scroll all the way to the right, here you can see this is this happens to be the current date. I'm recording this on 2/27. So this is the current date, and then these are all the confirmed cases for all those different locations in the current date. Okay, this is something that we're going to use, and we are actually not so much interested in the previous dates. We are basically just interested in the current date, basically what's the confirmed cases at this time. Okay, we want to be able to report that for all the different locations. So we have a CSV file here, and we know that we can get to the raw CSV file using this URL. Okay, so we are not going to have a database here. What we're going to do is when the application loads, when my Spring application loads, I want to make a request, a GET request to this CSV file URL, and all this data is available to me. I want to parse this and then provide a page which renders this in a nice web format. We're basically creating kind of like a nice UI skin for this data, but it's a good learning exercise for us to kind of take this data, parse it, hook into the Spring lifecycle, and then present it in a nice format. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to start by creating a service, okay? And let me switch to packages view here. Since this is a Spring Boot project, now you can technically start this application by starting this main menu class, okay? You can run this class, run this main menu, and you're gonna get a simple Spring Boot application running, okay? Now what I wanna do is when this application starts running, I want some code to execute and call this URL, okay? This raw URL, and get the data. We'll start there, all right? So I'm gonna go create a service here. I'm gonna create a new Java class, and then I'm going to call this services dot coronavirus data service. Okay, so this is going to be the service which is going to give us the data, and then when the application loads, it's going to make a call. It's going to have code which makes a call to that URL and fetches this data. Now you might ask me, well, what if the application is running for a day? Now you need to update this on a daily basis. We'll get to that. But first, we need to get the data and parse it. So we're going to start there. Okay, so here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a method called, let's see, public void. Let's call it fetch virus data. And this is going to make an HTTP call to this URL. All right, so I'm going to say virus data URL equals this URL that I put over here. Now this needs to make that HTTP call. So the way you do HTTP calls is using the HTTP client that's available in Java, I think from Java 11 onwards. So I'm going to say HTTP client, that's java.net.http. Let's call this client equals, this is HTTP client dot new HTTP client. All right, so I'm creating a new client. And then I'm going to say HTTP request, which is another class, which allows us to use the builder pattern. Let's say new builder dot provide the URI. I need to convert the string to a URI. This is basically saying where do I need to access? Where do I need to make an HTTP request? I'm basically doing an HTTP request here, right? I'm creating a new request. So this is HTTP request equals. All right. So here, this is going to be a URI dot create of the string. Okay, so it's going to create a URI out of it, and that URI is going to be passed to this URI method. Let me import this guy. This is a Java net URI. Okay, so I'm going to get this URI, and I'm going to set this URI, and then I'm going to do a dot build. Okay, you could have also done a dot new builder with URI. That's another option, but this is one way to do it. And now I'm going to get a response by sending the client this request. So I'm going to say client dot send. So there are a couple of options here. There is one synchronous send, then there is one asynchronous send. I'm just going to do a synchronous send because that's basically what I need now. I'm going to send this request, and the second option will be body handler. Okay, so it's like basically what to do with the body. And there are a bunch of utility methods that I can use. So there is one thing called HTTP response dot body handlers dot of string. Okay, and this is going to give me a response. So this is going to be HTTP. I'm going to use a local variable. I'm going to call this HTTP response. Okay, the response is basically sending, doing a client.send of request, and then what to do with the body. Okay, so basically create a client, which is a new HTTP client. I've created a request, which is basically creating a request using the builder pattern. And then I'm doing a client.send of request and saying, hey, just take the body and return it as a string. And then I have my HTTP response, which is HTTP response of string. Okay, now I can print out this output by doing system.out.println of HTTP response.body. Okay, so I'm making a call. I think I have to add exceptions to the method signature. I'm going to do that instead of catching this. So it basically added a couple of exceptions to the method signature. This is basically what happens when the client.send fails. So basically I'm sending this request, getting the response, which is response from this guy. It's going to return this whole block of text as a string. And then I'm printing this out in using system.out.println. Now, if I were to start this application, nothing happens because this is just a service. This is just a class that's sitting here. It's not even a Spring service. Okay. Now I need to do a couple of things. I need to make this a Spring service, and then I need to tell Spring, hey, there is this method which is sitting inside the service. Execute this when the application starts. So I'm going to first mark this as a service by using the add service stereotype. And this is going to make this a Spring service. And then I'm going to say, hey, Spring, execute this when the application starts. And that happens by using this annotation called post construct. Okay, so this is basically telling Spring, when you construct this instance of the service, after it's done, just execute this method. Okay, so it should, when the application starts up, since this is annotated with that service, Spring is going to create an instance of this class. And after it's done creating the instance of this class, it's going to say, hey, there is a post construct method here. Let me execute this method. Now it's going to execute the method which makes that get request and prints out the body directly. All right, let's run this and make sure we are getting that response back. Okay, I get a bunch of errors. JavaNet HTTP does not exist. Okay, that's because this is using an older version of the compiler. Let me go back there. Go to Preferences, Java Compiler. I have used this per module bytecode. Let me actually change this to 12 as well. Apply. And let's run this one more time. This is happening because JavaNet HTTP, the thing that's complaining about, is not available in an older version of Java. It's a newer version of Java that has that. So I'm going to click Run again. And the application should start up. There it is, starting up. And here is the output on the console. This is all the CSV that we have done a GET request for. Okay, so it ran this when the application started. You see all this data is available and getting printed in the console. Okay, so now we have this data, but this is in a text format. Well, it's in a CSV format and it's just showing up as string. That will not do. We need to be able to parse this thing. One way to parse this is by parsing CSV. You can basically do a split by comma, and there's a whole lot you can do to take this value out, but there is an easier way. So you don't have to do that. You can use a library. So I'm going to do a search for Java CSV library. And the first hit that I get is Commons CSV. Let's see. Go to the user guide. There should be some example to parse CSVs. This is good. This will do. Let's see how to download this. So there is a Maven repository access. I can put this in my pom.xml and it's going to pull this into the repo. So I'm going to open pom.xml. It's going to pull this from the repo into my class path. I'm sorry. So I'm going to paste this here and save this. So Commons CSV is the library that I'm going to use to convert the string, right? Which is what I have here. HTTP response.body is going to be converted into some objects that I can kind of parse these values. I can take this thing out, the location out, the latitude and the longitude out, the case numbers out, and all that. So how do I do this? Let's go back to the documentation. The user guide should have some information. I'm going to go to the user guide and let's copy paste some example that works. Okay, so it's saying there is a way you can access with headers. There is a way you can access without the headers. Header auto detection looks good because I believe we have the headers automatically. Yeah, the first row has headers. So I can use the header auto detection example. I'm going to just copy this code and I'm going to paste this directly in the service. We're going to find another place for this, but for now, this will do. All right, I'm going to import this stuff. CSV format, everything is imported. Now, let's take a look at this. CSV format, RFC 4180. I don't know what this is. This is probably a format of CSV, but allowing empty lines. I'm going to use default because that seems to be a more default way of doing things. Okay, so let's take a look at this example. With first record as header, which is fine, parse of IN. What is IN? IN seems to be a reader. Okay, we need a reader instance. Okay, a reader instance is a way in Java to read stuff like text. Okay, so what we have is a string here. We can convert it into a reader, no problem there, and we can pass it to this thing. And then you're going to get a records object. And now I can loop through this records object and I can get what I'm assuming is the header names. Yeah, this looks like header names. Okay, so let's first create this reader here. Okay, now I'm going to do this out here. So I'm going to do a string reader. String reader is basically an instance of reader which parses string. So I'm going to say CSV body reader equals new string reader of what do I need here? HTTP response dot get body dot body. Okay, now I have a reader from my string instance. Now I'm going to pass the reader over here, and now I can loop through this and I can get the header values for each record. Okay, so I pass in the header value and I get the column for that record. Okay, so when I'm running this a bunch of times, I'm looping through this. So I can specify province/state, I'm guessing, and it's going to print all the provinces for this. So let's say I do this province stats state. Okay, and I'm going to system.out.println state, and I'm going to get rid of these two. Okay, so I'm looping through this and I'm printing the first column. Okay, the first column here. Well, not all of them have values for the first column, but I think it should be fine because it's just going to have a something like this, right? If the value doesn't exist, it's just going to have a comma. And I'm guessing, hoping that this is going to result in an empty string or something like that. Okay, now save and rerun this. Now what's going to happen is it's going to still make that request to that URL, get a string. I'm creating a string reader out of it, and then I am parsing it using the open source library that we got for parsing CSV, which is Apache CSV. And then I'm looping through the records after the parse, and I'm pulling out one column value and then printing it. Let's see if this worked. All right, this seems to be working. Seems to be working. There are some empty rows here, but it seems to be working for the most part. So this is good. This is good. Okay, now I have this. When the application loads, I am making a call to a CSV URL, which I know some folks are tirelessly working to update on a daily basis as this disease plays out. And I'm looping through the parsed CSV. Now, here's what I want to do. I not only want it to run when the application starts, but I also want it to run on a regular basis, right? Because let's say I deploy this on AWS, for example, and then I leave it running for a while. After a day, this becomes outdated, right? Because the file is being updated every day. So I want to run this on a daily basis. So the way to do this is by using the @scheduled annotation in Spring. The @scheduled annotation schedules the run of a method on a regular basis. You can specify a fixed delay, a fixed rate, or a cron expression. I like cron expressions, so let's do this. I can specify a string. It's basically a string which specifies how often you need to run it. And the cron expression typically goes like you have your second, and then minute, hour, and then day, month, year. I think there should be 6. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and I want it to run the first second. Let me actually make it star so that it runs every second. Okay, so every second. So what I've done here is I've scheduled it to run this method every second. We're telling Spring, hey, Spring, execute this method every second. Now, I think there's one other thing I need to do, which is to go to the main class here and then say @enable scheduling. So Spring knows that this needs to run. Okay, so this registers with Spring. There are a couple of things you need to do. What this does is tell Spring to kind of wrap these methods that have the schedule thing in a proxy and have logic to call this method. Somebody has to call this method, so Spring creates a proxy to call this method within the specified frequency. All right, I'm going to refresh this. I will rerun this. And now what should happen is this needs to get executed every second, right? There's a call that's going to go out every second. And yeah, looks like it's happening. There is lots and lots of stuff getting printed. Okay, it's getting executed every second. Now I'm going to change this to run every day. Okay, so let's say the 0th hour of every day. So this is second, minute, this is hour. I want it to, let's say the first hour of every day, I want this to run. So with this, I'm executing this method once every day. So you can kind of leave this running in production, and this is going to happen every day. Now, why do I do this? I want to do this because now here I'm just printing to the console and nothing interesting is happening, but I want to save this information in my memory. So I'm going to create a data instance, like a model instance, and save this. Now that I have the ability to parse, I can create a model object. Okay, I'm going to say models dot, let's see here. This is, that's a location stats. Models dot location stats. Okay, so here I need the private string state, private string country, All right, state, country. I don't need the latitude and longitude. I just need the, let's say, latest reported cases. All right, private int latest latest total. Cases. All right. I'm gonna create getters and setters for all three. And now I can create a new instance of location stats, like an array of location stats. All right. So I'm going to say private list of location stats. Let's call this all stats. New array list. Okay, now I can create instances of location stats and populate this list every time I'm getting this request. Every time I make a get request and get like a bunch of records, I'm going to drop the previous stats information and then reconstruct this from the scratch. Okay, so I'm going to go here and at the very last minute, I'm going to say, I'm going to create a new list here. I'm going to call this new stats. The reason I'm doing this and not clearing this out is because of concurrency reasons. If there are a lot of people accessing our service, we don't want them to get error responses while we are busy trying to construct this. So I'm going to create a new instance of this. And when I'm done constructing, I'm going to populate all stats with the new stats. Okay, so if this takes like a fraction of a second to do, in that fraction of a second, if somebody is requesting information, they still get the current information while we're working on this, right? So that's kind of why I'm doing this. I was just thinking for a second to see how we can best eliminate this. Ideally, you don't want to be doing this. You don't want to create state inside Spring services, but for this purposes, it's okay. For what we're doing, it's okay. All right, so I'm going to create a new instance, right? Location stats, location stat equals new location stats, and I'm going to populate the stuff directly over here. Okay, location stat dot set state will be record dot get of province state. Okay, set country will be, what do we have as a header? Country / region. Okay. And then location stat dot set latest total cases. This one's going to be tricky because this is, I believe this keeps going, right? So if they update this tomorrow, they're going to add another column over here, right? So this is, I cannot just look up, well, I can kind of construct the string, but let me see if I can find out the last one here. All right, so this is the object that we are looking up from. Record dot get is set iterator, there seems to be size. All right, so I'm going to do, let's go back here. Looks like I can specify a number to get a column. All right, so I'm going to do record dot get of record dot size -1. Let's see if this works. Okay, so what's the error here? Requires int. Oh, this is a string. Okay, I got it. Whatever this returns as a response is going to be a string, right? Because that's what record.get is going to give me. I need to convert into an integer. So I'm going to say integer dot parse int of this thing should be able to set this over here. All right, now what I'm going to do is generate a toString method here so that I can print something nice. And then here I'm going to print this out. Location stat dot, well, I can just do system dot out dot println of location stat so that it executes the toString method. I can get an idea of what's happening here. And then I set it to new stats. Let's say new stats dot add of location stat. And at the end of the loop, when this is all done, when the method is about to exit, I'm going to say this dot all stats equals new stats. Okay, it's not completely concurrency proof, but it's good enough for now. I'm okay with it. All right, so I'm going to run this, and we will see if it prints toString for those bunch of records. Okay, looks like it's working. There are a bunch of stuff that is getting printed, and it's showing the country and the total number of cases for each of those countries. Okay, next thing to do is to render this in a UI format. Okay, I want to be able to access a URL and render these stats in an HTML page, right? I want to print this out in an HTML page. So I'm going to create a controller for this purpose, right? So the way to get any page to show up when you access a URL is by creating a controller. So I'm going to create a new, not a Kotlin class, sorry. I'm going to create a new Java class, and controllers dot, I'm going to call this home controller, because this is what gets accessed when I load the home URL. Let's say controller annotation. So this makes it a controller, a Spring controller. And now I'm going to create a method here, public string. I'm going to call this a home method. And then here I'm going to return, I can return a template value, right? So here, what I'm doing is I am not making this a REST controller, right? This is something to remember. You can do something like this, REST controller. And this is kind of like a shorthand for saying all of the methods in this controller returns REST responses. So it has to be converted into a JSON response and then returned back. But I don't want it to be a REST controller. Like I said, I want it to render UI, an HTML UI. So I'm marking this as a controller, in which case what I'm returning is going to be a name which points to the template. Okay, so let's say I create home over here. Okay, so this means that this should be mapped to a HTML file here called home.html. Okay, so that's what it returns in. Okay, so whatever I put over here is what this returns. Let me say h1 coronavirus tracker. Okay, just for test. And now here I go to my home controller, and then I'm going to map this to the root URL. I'm going to say when there is a get mapping to /, which is basically the root URL, return the home template. And then the home template is going to be this HTML. This works because in our pom.xml, we have thyme leaf dependency sitting somewhere over here. Yeah, you see this? This thyme leaf dependency is sitting here. So Spring Boot knows to do this. Okay, now let's refresh. Well, restart the server. And I'm going to open a browser window and access localhost 8080. And here is our HTML page. Okay, so this is perfect. Now what I need to do is use a model concept. The idea is when you call the controller, when you access a URL and call the controller, you have an opportunity here to fetch data or do whatever and set it in the context of whatever is rendering this page. Okay, so there's the concept called model. You put things on the model in this page. And then here, when you're rendering the HTML, right, you can access things from the model and then construct your HTML directly. Okay, let me give you an example. I'm going to add this model argument here. importing the class from Arc Spring Framework UI model. Okay, I can put something in the model here, right? Spring is giving me this object and saying, hey, put into this object whatever you want, and then I will have it accessible for you when you're entering your HTML. Okay, so let's say I do one attribute. Okay, so model.add attribute, and I'm going to say test name, and then I'm going to provide a value which is a string. I'm just going to call this test. Okay, so I'm placing an attribute on this model called test name, which is basically the data that I need for rendering this, and I'm giving it the actual value of a string capital test. Now I can access that over here. Okay, now I can access that attribute over here. And the way to access the attribute is by using Thymeleaf syntax. Okay, so let's say I create, let me go to thymeleaf.org and copy some startup syntax. I'm just going to the guides. All right, here it looks like a good starting point. It's some HTML that I can copy and paste into my HTML here. Okay, now this is home.html. It has the Thymeleaf namespace that I'm going to use to pull up values from the model that's set over here, right? This provides Thymeleaf syntax. I'm going to change the title again here, coronavirus tracker application. And then meta is fine. I don't need CSS now. And now here is a paragraph tag, which is referring to that attribute in the model, okay, that you have set over here. So we have set test name. So I'm going to put this test name here. And then here, what you provide is kind of like a placeholder when you don't have the value. Okay, so I don't need a placeholder, so I'm just going to leave this as is. And now restart my server. Okay, now if I refresh this, this is not quite what I wanted. I believe this is $, not hash. Okay, so let's try this one more time. I believe the way to get the attribute is using $. Let's see if it shows over here. $ curly brace. Well, there you go. This is how you find it. Okay, it's restarted. And here I get the value here. Okay, so what we did was we set an attribute in the controller, and then we looked it up in our template. Okay, so I'm just referring to the name that we have over here. So you can imagine if we want to show all the data that we are looking up when the application starts, all we need to do is get that value, which is sitting in a service here, right? It's already sitting in a service, a member variable of that service instance. I'm going to get that and put that into the model instead of this test name thing that I have going on. Okay, so let's say I call this location stats, and then I'm going to get that object instance, which is the coronavirus data service dot all stats. Okay, now since this is a service, I can auto wire this into my controller, and that's how the controller is going to get access to it. Okay, I'm going to call this coronavirus data service, and I am auto wiring this. Now that I've auto wired this, I'm going to say service dot. Oops, I don't have a getter. So let me create a getter here for the service. This is a private instance, so it doesn't have getters. So what I'm going to do here is create a getter for all stats, and then go back to my home controller and then say get all stats. And now it is going to set that on the model. Okay, and I'm returning home, which means that in my home.html, I cannot just print that anymore. Well, I guess I can. It's just going to return an toString, but we can do better. We can loop through this. Let me see how to loop through stuff in Thymeleaf. There must be an each way of looping. Setting attribute values, iteration. There you go. th:\each. Yep, this is exactly what I want. I want a table. So I'm going to copy this whole table syntax, and I'm going to put this over here, and then we will modify this. Okay, so we have, what do we have? We have state, we have country, and then we have total cases reported. All right, so th:\each, this is a variable name, and this is the loop variable name, and this is the actual variable you're looping over. So the actual variable you're looping over is location stats. Okay, so I'm going to put location stats here, and then this is going to be location stat. Okay, location stat dot state. This is location stat dot country, and then location stat dot, I forgot the name, what do we call it? Latest total cases. Latest total cases is this binary ternary operator in the example. We don't need that. Get rid of this. Well, 0 is a good default to use, and then this one, no state, no country, it just leaves blank. Okay, and then I close the each. Do I close the each? It's closed with the tr, and then I close the table. Okay, let's restart the server and see if it prints these values. Back to my browser, back to our application, and we are printing the values here. So it has the state, country, and then the total reported cases, which I guess gets updated on a daily basis because we are going to be calling this on a daily basis. So this is what we've got. Okay, we can make this look a little pretty though, so let's give that a try. Now we can use Bootstrap. I think I'm done with Thymeleaf for now. Let's use Bootstrap. Bootstrap, if you don't know, is a CSS framework. I guess it's a framework or a library which basically contains some pre-built styles that we can use. Okay, so I can just copy this CSS or click the copy link and put that CSS over here in my HTML. And now I have Bootstrap CSS in my page. Now, once I have the Bootstrap CSS in my page, I can add a bunch of classes in my HTML, and I can use the CSS goodness that Bootstrap provides. So let's see if there is a table styling that's available here for me. Let's actually see how this works without anything else, right? I haven't done anything. I'm just adding the Bootstrap CSS. I believe it changes the font to something other than what we've got over here. This is sans serif. I think it changes it to, well, this is serif. I think it changes it to sans serif. Okay, there you go. Table looks a little bit good already. Okay, slightly better. Okay, now another thing I'm going to do is get rid of the console logs. We don't need that here. System.println. We don't need to log to the console anymore, and we have this in place. Okay, so these are only the cases that are reported. Okay, I'm going to put a caption here, a heading. This is H1, coronavirus tracker application. This application lists the current number of cases reported across the globe. Well, one thing I can do is report a kind of like a total. Okay, let's see if there is some component which allows me to show like a total amount, right? So we've got toast, we've got card. Let's take Jumbotron. All right, let's do Jumbotron. Okay, I'm gonna copy this, and what I want to put over here is, let me get rid of test name. What I want to put over here is kind of like the total number of cases that have been reported as of today. Okay, so I'm going to say total cases reported as of today, and we don't need these stuff here. And then this is going to be, let's say, total cases. We need this curly dollar curly brace. That's the syntax, which I forgot. So I'm going to copy this, undo to get back what we had before, and then put this guy here. Okay, so I'm going to say, get this guy. I don't use Thymeleaf on a regular basis. I don't remember the syntax. Sorry, guys. Hopefully you don't mind a little bit of copy paste. All right, so we're going to say total reported cases, okay, which means that what I need to do is create a new attribute on the model for the total reported cases. Okay, so I need to do this. And the way to do this, there are a couple of things I can do. I can loop through all the stats, kind of add them up, and then set it on the attribute over here. Or I can make that as a part of the coronavirus data service. Okay, so I can make this be in the state over here. I'm just going to put this in the controller because at this point, it's very much a UI concern for me. It's basically the controller which needs this information. I don't have another business reason for calculating the addition except for showing it at the home page. So I'm going to get this out and then introduce a local variable here. Not what I wanted. Introduce a local variable called allstats, and then I'm going to do allstats dot openstream dot, let's map to integer. Let's say stat dot get total cases. So I'm basically getting the integer and then I'm summing them up. Okay, so this is going to be a local variable, total cases. Okay, and I'm going to set location stats to be all stats, and then I'm going to get the total cases. What is the name that I put over here? Total reported cases is going to be an attribute I need to set. I'm going to say total reported cases is going to be, let's call it the same name so that there's no confusion. I'm going to call this total reported cases. All right, so just a quick note, what I'm doing here is I'm taking this list of objects, converting it into a stream, and then mapping to integer. Each object maps to the integer value, which is the total cases for that record. And then I'm going to sum this up. So basically I'm going to take that stream, sum it up, and then assign it to an integer. All right, restart. Let's see what this looks like. Pretty cool, huh? These are the total number of cases that have been reported as of today for coronavirus. The fact that these many people have been reported having the virus is not cool. Let me clarify. The UI which shows this is cool. All right, moving on. I want to next have kind of like a difference indicator. So we are getting the time series, right? So when you go over here, you're getting from the data, you're kind of getting like what has changed every day. So if I'm looking up the current date, I can see what was reported the day before and what is currently reported, so I can get the delta. Now what I want to do here is show that delta, okay? Whether it's increased or if it's the same, like if it's increased, how much of it has increased. So that's what I want to show over here. So there are a couple of things I'm going to do. I'm going to put this whole thing inside a thing called a container, okay? So this table is going to be inside a div with a class called container, which is going to make this look a little nicer. Okay, I'm going to wrap this div outside here. So this table is going to be inside this div. Okay, and now I'm going to go to my location stats over here, and I'm going to create a new member variable called diff from previous day. Okay, difference from the previous day. And I'm going to create getters and setters for this as well. And now here, what I'm going to do in my service is not only am I going to set the total cases, I also want to find the difference from the previous day. So I'm going to extract this out here. There is a little bit of logic here. I'm going to create a local variable, latest cases, okay, and then I'm going to create previous day cases, and this is going to be size -2, and total cases is going to be latest cases, and then location stat dot set diff from previous day to be latest cases minus previous day cases. All right, fair enough. And in my home.html, I'm going to add a column. Let's call this changes since last day. And I'm going to use that difference that I've calculated over here, right? The difference is diff from previous day. That's the variable name. I'm going to put that here. And the default is 0 for that too, which is fine. All right, restart. And refresh the page. And here is the delta that we are seeing. Oh my goodness. All right, let's move on. Let's move on. All right, let's actually test it once to make sure that's right, because that's really bad. That's really bad. I want to make sure we are gathering the right data. Okay, let's take a look at something which has a huge delta. All right, this is the value that I want to check. I'm going to search and then go all the way to the end, and this looks correct. All right, now this table looks kind of crappy. Okay, so this is kind of looks crappy. Plus this kind of looks crappy as well. So I changed my mind. I'm going to put this container at the very top so that it encapsulates the whole page. Okay, so that you see this gap over here, this padding around the thing. I want that padding to apply to everything over here. Okay, so that makes it look a little bit better, I guess. Okay, and then let's take a look at the Bootstrap table and see what they have for making the table look a little nicer, right? So I'm going to search for table, and let's see what they've got. This looks like a nice table. I guess I have to put the class table over here. I am going to say table, class equals table, and then th scope equals row. Well, scope is not going to do a whole lot. I guess this is it. Let's restart. And here we have a slightly nicer looking table. And it says this is the total cases reported. And these are the changes since the previous day. Okay, let's do one more. I'm going to have this thing show up, like the sum of the total changes. The last thing I want to do before I wrap up. Hopefully, we'll see. I'm going to add another thing over here, which is basically what was the total count the previous day, okay, or basically what has changed from the previous day. So I'm going to go to my controller, and just like I'm adding all the total reported cases, I'm going to add all the new cases. All right, total new cases, and I'm going to sum up. What am I summing up here? I'm summing up the difference from the previous day. All right, extra parentheses. What's going on? Stat different previous day. No, it's not a set, it's a get different previous day, and then summing them up as well. And let's find a good place to put this thing here, right? So let's see. Let's look at the Jumbotron and see if there is a good way to put this. Jumbotron. What does this look like? Okay, so I think this is a good way to do it. So there is a HR, which is a horizontal ruler, which works fine over here. I'm going to put the horizontal ruler over here, and then I'm going to have a paragraph. And this is going to be new cases reported since yesterday. Yesterday is a little bit tricky depending on when you're looking at this. I'm going to say previous day. And then let's make this a span. And then another span. And then I'm going to copy the th text. And then this is, what did I call it? I haven't actually saved it to the model. I need to do that. Okay, total new cases. Total new cases, total new cases. And in my HTML, total new cases is going to be what gets rendered over here. All right, refresh, restart the server, and refresh the page. Okay, this looks okay. Not too good, but it's okay. Let's just leave it at that. I can spend eternity trying to tweak this thing and make this look good, but I'm gonna settle for this, all right? So anytime you access this page, refresh the page, it is gonna show you what is the total current cases of coronavirus reported around the globe, and then what is the difference from the previous day. So since the previous day, there have been 1,359 new cases, and it has a list of all the places where things have been reported and the changes since the previous day. Now, before I wind up, there are a couple of notes I want to share. One technological and one related to the problem domain. First, the code that we have written is fairly decent for the most part for a production application, except for a couple of differences. First is that in this project, I'm saving state in the service. Okay, I'm saving the total cases as a member variable of a service. This is something that's usually frowned upon. You don't want to save state in the service. It's usually something that when you create a service, you want to make it stateless. Okay, for the purposes of this project, it is fine. But when you're having a business service with multiple different states, multiple different data sources, you don't want to save these member variables in a service and look it up. And also test cases. I haven't written any tests here, which is not something that you would typically do in a real world application. You would write test cases for all your code. So that's the technology part of it. The second note that I want to make is, as much as we talked about it being a rational look at this problem, the data is really dependent on the source, right? We are extracting data from a GitHub repository that I found from my research on the internet. I have no idea about the validity of this data, how accurate it is. Me featuring this source of data is not really an endorsement of the accuracy of the data. It's just something that I pulled up by just doing Google searches. So it's just something that happened to be available that I pulled up. I make no guarantees about the accuracy or the validity of the data. Just want to put that out there. I hope this overall project was helpful as a way for you to get to know how you can build something like this from start to finish. And I hope you gain some insights to build something else of your own. Thanks for watching.